It is the Beaver Banter podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner. There is Ian Rivers. And Ian, always a great day to be a Beaver. And, second show of 2025. We had Jared Rubedo of the Bemidji Pioneer, the sports editor there last week. You can go check out that episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, as well as the Beaver Banter YouTube page. That's a good place to check it out. But now we're kind of rolling here on the two-man show for this week. And Ian, I think this is the first time all year long we have no football news to report on.
Yeah, no, I can't think of any off the top of my head. I mean, unless you want to construe that, I don't know if you saw anything about the tweet. Somebody posted that they're going to be looking into making all college athletes 5-year eligibility.
Oh,
yeah. So I don't know what I think about that. I think there's a lot of different dynamics that make you there's pros and cons for it, of course, but it would be very strange. And then you have to start wondering, like, well, what do we call? Do we start having to refer to them as first-year players and second-year players? Because,
right,
now the traditional sense of freshmen, that sort of thing. But hey, other than that, no real football news, according to the Bemidji State program.
Yeah, I mean, there are some guys who made academic to all district, 8 of them. In fact, if you look at Colton Heinrichs, Mario Cavallaro, Bryce Peters, Jake Ganning, Caden Bolte, Drayton Lehman, Connor Kovis, and Sam McGath. So there you go. We did get football in. We did.
Gannon also won an award. I'm blanking on the name.
Yeah, the Remington Trophy.
Yeah. So congrats to him. The Division II award for it. So I believe it's still called the Remington, but Of course he didn't win it. For all of college football, he was the Division II nominee for it. But still, that Bemidji State offensive line this year was pretty phenomenal, and he was at the center of it. So yeah,
Unintended. Pun intended as the center. And the other thing, and I don't know how specifically their offense works, so maybe I'm misrepresenting something here, but as the center, it's kind of your job to point out protections. It's your job to make sure that, your line kind of knows who's who and kind of gets, basically, for lack of a better term, sets the table for every single play on top of having the snap stuff. So the center is always considered one of the brighter guys on the offensive line and somebody who you kind of expect to be the field general out there. Maybe that's different, but that's kind of a football traditional thing. So yeah, to run that offense like that and a successful unit in that, super impressive. Obviously, he's a grad student in that year, able to help things out. And it's just cool. So there you go. We did find a way to squeeze in football a little bit. So there you go, football team. You get a little bit of love today. Moving on, let's start off with men's hockey, Ian, just because there's not a ton to report on what they've done over the last week. They did have the scrimmage, or the exhibition, I should say, but really what's the difference, against Manitoba, and they cruised to a 5-0 win. They did what they needed to do. Did you have a chance to watch the scrimmage? And if so, Ian, did you get anything from it, or was this just a chance to watch the boys go out on the ice and do stuff?
I did watch it off and on. I mean, it was an exhibition that the Beavers, especially when it got towards the third period, were cruising pretty handily in. I didn't take a whole lot from it just because it is an exhibition against a non-NCAA school. And, you can take whatever you want. It's good that we won 5-0. That's regardless of whatever happened. It's good that some guys got some run in this game, especially the goaltending position, because they don't normally get in there with Scholl hogging so much of the net. Rightfully so. He's phenomenal. But it was good. It was good to see the guys get involved that got involved. Riley Funk getting back on the score sheet was awesome to see. Jackson Panzer had 2 goals. And then 2 guys who we kind of lightly talked about with Jared, who we're hoping can kind of see themselves get more productive in the second half of this season, is Adam Flamang getting a goal. And then Carter Ranclev got another goal. And of course, it's not going to count towards the season total, but hopefully for those 2 players in particular, you can start to see that, like, all right, it's like a free throw in basketball, right? Sometimes it's just good to see the ball go through the hoop. Sometimes it's just good to see the puck hit the back of the net. And for those 2 especially, Carter's been on a bit of a cold streak ever since, the first 3 weeks of the season ended. and Flamang has, I believe, only one goal this season so far. Those two guys are going to be guys that you want to get more involved as the season goes along. And Jackson Panzer is a guy that a lot of the fan base has been excited about since it was announced that he was flipping his commitment from North Dakota last season to come play at BSU. So all five of those guys, or four, I guess, between the 5 goals, great to see their names on the score sheet. And hopefully that can continue. Otherwise, I didn't really take a lot from it. They did shut them out. So goaltending, I'm not exactly sure. I can check how many minutes each of the goaltenders played in this game. It looks like Robbins got the first 30 minutes, and then Weemkin got the last 30 minutes. They made a total of 19 saves. Robbins made 7, and Trent Weemkin made 12. So not a whole lot of action for them to see, but the defense was playing pretty well. Hopefully it's just a little game to, you know what, we've only played one game in the last month or so when it was against Duluth, and they kind of got worked in that game. So hopefully this is a get your skates underneath you, because you got a big weekend coming up against Bowling Green, who is now a top 4 team in the CCHA after sweeping Lake State last weekend. And it's going to be an important weekend on the road in the Slater Ice Arena. Not a fun place to play, especially when you are needing to pick up some points in the CCHA.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And kind of the same points on the exhibition there. It's good to see guys have something positive just to get the ball rolling. But yeah, I mean, there's not a ton you can really kind of take from it. It's just a lot of wish casting, a lot of hoping. But yeah, they get thrown right back into the thick of it. And I think that's good, because with this Bemidji State team, it always feels like when you give them, when you give them that weekend where it's like, okay, cool, they got this lighter weekend, whatever. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, they played kind of weird this weekend. But then there's Minnesota State comes to town. All of a sudden, on the Friday night, you're playing one of your better games of the season. So I think to have kind of the stakes be raised a little bit, especially after kind of how the year ended and the non-conference schedule going the way it did, I think that's just a good way for them to kind of snap, back to reality a little bit, or just to be able to kind of get things in the right mindset for the men's hockey team. So I think overall, this is going to be good for them to play a team like Bowling Green. The problem is, you got to go on the road. Slater Ice Arena, not always the easiest spot to play. It's a tough a travel trip, but overall, this is the chance Bemidji State has to start stacking some good weekends on top of each other. They have to do kind of what they did last year. We talked a lot about this with Jared a week ago, so I don't want to rehash everything from last week's podcast, but last year's team, to have the success they had, went on a big run at the end of the year, and you're kind of going to need to do the same thing. I'm not saying you got to win 11 straight or anything like that, or you have to win the McNaughton Cup, but
that would help.
It would be nice, certainly.
That'd be awesome.
It would be very nice.
We're not going to tell you not to do that.
If you want to, we're not going to stop you.
But we'll settle. We'll settle for 10.
We'll settle even for 9. I'll take a 9-game winning streak.
Yeah, that'd be fun too.
I'll even take an 8-game point streak. Just to.
Do we have a 2-game win streak, CJ? I might take a 2-game win streak.
We have not. Bemidji State has not won back-to-back games. Since
they have.
They won St. Thomas on November 23rd and then November 29th when they beat UND at the Sanford Center. Otherwise, they stacked wins together on the final day in Ferris 3-0 and then beat Minnesota State 1-0 that next Friday night. So they have not swept the weekend all season long, which is obviously kind of, they're 8-9-3. It's just kind of been the position they've put themselves in all year long, but it still just feels like a good opportunity for them to might as well do it this weekend. You might as well do it, because if you have a good weekend against Bowling Green, you play Northern Michigan the next weekend, and there's an opportunity at home to pick up some points and to stack some wins. St. Thomas is going through it. You play Ferris again on your home ice, and then things ramp back up again with Michigan Tech, Bowling Green, Minnesota State to end the year. So that's a gauntlet. So from here until the entire month of January, I know Bowling Green's no slouch, but the entire month of January is just begging Bemidji State to pick up some points and to get themselves back into it. And by February 1st, when they'll have theoretically their 3 toughest series of the year back to back to back, maybe you could swap out Bowling Green. But Michigan Tech to Mankato is always going to be a tough way to end the season, just based on program histories and rivalries and whatnot. So this month of January is a good opportunity. We're going to learn about kind of how on February 1st, we'll know if we're like seriously like, all right, this team can make a Mason Cup run, or if we're like, oh, looking kind of tough. But it's all going to start with Bowling Green. And Ian, just kind of what's the keys to victory for Bemidji State to, what does a good weekend look like in your eyes, and how do they do it? Is it splitting? Is it, hey, you have to get a sweep? Is it, getting a win and a draw, like just winning the points on the weekend? What does a successful series look like against Bowling Green, and how does Bemidji State get that done?
I think a successful series is splitting. I mean, you cannot be too upset if you take 3 points away from this on the road. It's been probably up there with Ferris State in terms of like just places that Bemidji State has not had success since I've been following the team. Like, they went there a couple of years ago and I thought they played well. There was, of course, a weird high sticking call. I remember talking about that with Lucas after that happened the last time I believe we were out there. It's not somewhere we play super often, however the schedule works out, but whenever we do, we seem to just stumble and fall a little bit. And it always seems like it's kind of coming out of winter break that we're over there. I remember specifically the year that we won the McNaughton Cup back in 16-17. We were on winter break when that series happened, or just coming off of it. And it was just an ugly split for the team on the road. I think that it's not necessary that you get a sweep. Obviously, they're a team that's ahead of you in the standings. Getting 4 points or 5 points or 6 points from this weekend would be phenomenal, because that would mean that you have gained ground in the standings on those top 4 teams. But when you're looking at the next 4 weeks, this is definitely the hardest of the 4 weeks. And, that's assuming that St. Thomas doesn't turn themselves around too, because right now I think it would be a little easier to play St. Thomas, shorter road trip. They're a little bit worse off than Bowling Green right now, but you got to play sound. I mean, the special teams just have to get better. Jared mentioned just how brutal the special teams were over the last couple of weeks of December, and it's got to be better here in this stretch, because the things that we were good at last year we're bad at now, and the things that we were terrible at last year, like you said, faceoffs, especially. The team just doesn't stink at faceoffs anymore. Riley Funk is a big reason for that. Jackson Judding and Jake McLean also very good at faceoffs. So we've got some centermen that we can rely on to win faceoffs now, but it's not helping our special teams at all. And that's one thing that we thought was a big detractor from special teams last year. So yeah, I think a successful weekend would be just splitting points, getting 3, and maybe win that Saturday game. If you're going to win one, get the one on Saturday so you can kind of head into the weekend with a little momentum. And like Jared talked about last week with us, stack some games on top of each other. That's what last year's team did so well. And that's what this year's team is not doing well enough right now, is carrying momentum, getting sweeps. Obviously, we look back and, they haven't won a single weekend, or I'm sorry, haven't swept a single weekend. They did take 5 points from St. Thomas, but technically it's a tie and a shootout win. So that would make it like a 4-game stretch there between the Minnesota game, St. Thomas, and then North Dakota. And you even tied against North Dakota. So that's a really good stretch. But outside of that 5-game stretch, it's been few and far between for stacking wins on top of each other. So that's going to be the most important thing, is just don't have another weekend like Michigan Tech, where it's just super inconsistent and, you let them steal a point from you late, and just hold on to the points that you've got and try to keep yourself in a good position to get home ice at a bare minimum, try to fight for the 2 and the 3 seeds in the conference. Because like we talked about, this team is still alive for the McNaughton Cup, but until they kind of show me that they can get back in the running, and until Minnesota State does slip up, I'm not going to sit here and beg for us to sweep every weekend just so that we can get into that race. If they do that, then I'll start talking like that. But for now, I'm just going to keep my expectations a little bit lighter, hope for, 2, 3, 4 seed in the McNaughton Cup playoffs, or I'm sorry, the Mason Cup playoffs. That would be ideal for me, and it's got to start this weekend.
It's the we've become the Thanos meme, where it's the what did it cost to become good at face-offs? Everything. That's pretty much what it cost.
Your sanity.
Yeah, men's hockey obviously with the big weekend. I think they do end up getting a split. I think that not that they've had rest isn't the right word, but you've just kind of been away from conference play for a little bit. I think they do come out a little motivated. I think that they do end up splitting. I think that they win the Friday game, and I think they kind of slip up on the Saturday, and they kind of take the house money and go home. Is that what you were going to predict?
No, that's what I don't want. I want them to win the Saturday game so they can kind of carry the momentum. Because I guess, let me go look back at it. But, other than Minnesota, it feels like most of the time, I guess we're kind of 50-50 on Ferris. We won Saturday. Mankato, we won Friday. Augustana, we won Friday. Minnesota, we won Saturday. St. Thomas, we won Saturday. North Dakota, we won Friday. Lake State, we won Friday. So it's very 50-50 on whether or not we're actually carrying momentum into the next weekend or not, and take momentum for what you will. But I'm hoping for a split, but they win Saturday. That'll be my prediction, and we'll see who's right. Hopefully we can put our good karma together, and we both are correct on wins on Friday and Saturday.
I'm all for it. By the way, in the overall series, Bemidji State is down 19-20-3 all time. Their record at the Sanford Center, they're 14-7-2. When they go to the ice arena, they are 5-13-1.
Yeah.
Bemidji State is 6-4 in the last 10 matchups. So,
all right,
there's something. I'm leaving.
Let's take the lead in that series. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, let's do that. Last year, Bemidji State did get the sweep at home, like we talked about. That was kind of the turning point last year. And 2 years ago, in 2023, those games were played in around this time last year, the 14th and 13th of January, and they were losses. The last win for Bemidji State in Bowling Green, they went to overtime in 2022 in January, and they lost. The last time they got a win in Bowling Green was an overtime and a 3-on-3 overtime win, 4-3 back in the 2020-21 season. So that was the team that beat Wisconsin. That's the last time Bemidji State has been able to get a win in Bowling Green. The actual true victory was January of 2019 when they got a 3-2 victory there. So the last time they got a true win in Bowling Green, Ian, we were still students at Bemidji State University.
Yikes. Yeah, let's break that this season. Let's do it.
Let's do it. I know that we say some of these locations like, oh man, they never play there well there. And sometimes you got to say it, and then you see the numbers bear out, and you're like, oh yeah, never mind. Like that's statistically true. It's not even hyperbole. It's a tough road trip to Ohio, man. I'm just in a really bad place right now. Dang, Ohio.
Let's break that curse this weekend.
Let's break that, please. The sooner you win, the sooner you get out of there. So if you think about it like that. Anyway, let's talk a little women's hockey. Ian, over the weekend, they had an opportunity to play in the University of Minnesota Showcase. And they also, by the way, played the Gophers in Lakeville at the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame Museum Face-Off Classic. So let's go back to that game against the Gophers. Not a WCHA game. They lost 4-1 in that matchup. That was on New Year's Day. And then you go to January 3rd and 4th, which is Friday. Saturday, they play a ranked Penn State team, ranked 11th or 12th, depending on who you ask. And they had a lead in that game, and all of a sudden it evaporated. It was 4-4 going into the third, and you lose 6-4. That one's a little frustrating. It felt like you had them, felt like maybe you had a chance to kind of blitz them and pick up a really, really nice win there. But then you do rebound on the weekend. You need to beat a 500 team in Brown. You get a 5-4 win there. And just, again, the wins and losses over the last 3 games, not where you want them to be. You went 1-2 in that stretch. But those final 2 games, a ranked team in Penn State, you punched them in the mouth and almost got them to fall over. They were able to kind of get themselves back up and win, but you still ran right with them. And then you got to win against Brown. Overall, I think that's a good stretch. And I think it is to a couple things. One, this team, it has some stuff there. They are building something. And 2, the WCHA is just such a good hockey conference in women's hockey that, I mean, you're just playing these blue bloods and good teams all the time that sometimes when you look at the record, it maybe doesn't quite tell the story of how good this team is, at least on paper, because they just play. There's so many other great teams in this conference.
100%. Yeah. The thing that I'm taking from this weekend is honestly like, hey, the offense is kind of here, like that's one thing we barked about earlier in the season, and we've had some good offensive games. They put up 8 goals in 2 games against St. Thomas. But outside of that, they put up 3 goals against Minnesota State in a game a couple weeks ago. But mostly it's just been, all right, the defense plays pretty well in some games, and you just need some more goal scoring. And they've gotten it over these last 2 games. But the defense also hasn't been phenomenal because they scored 9 goals over this stretch of 2 games, but they gave up 10. So, it is exciting hockey to watch. And like you said, the Penn State game, how exciting would that have been, to be at? Just back and forth, 3 power play goals in the first 25 minutes of the game for the Beavers. Morgan Smith had a couple of goals this weekend. Issa Godel added one on the power play as well. Haley Armstrong had a couple of goals late against Brown on Saturday to kind of ice that one. Godel added another power play goal on Saturday. So it's really good to see the offense flowing, and hopefully we can get in future years, even if it's not this year, I guess, a little bit more consistency between offense playing well and defense playing well at the same time, because oftentimes it seems like it's one or the other. You either lose 1-0 or you might win a 5-4 shootout. And it's like, okay, when are both things going to come together and be fruition? Because other than that 4-1 win over St. Thomas, we really haven't seen that this year, but it is still a work in progress. We are under a first-year head coach, and we'll have to see how that goes. Just another building block win. This was, win number 4 on the season, and how many wins did we have last year, CJ? Was it 3?
I mean, Dave, I feel
it
like
was 4 last season too. So we still have plenty more opportunities to pick up more wins this season still. So that's it. If you can improve that total, I guess I can't be that mad. So that's what we're gunning for here in the second half, is 1 win. That feels really bad to say. We're gunning for more than that, but that's the minimum that we've got to get out of this.
That's all that's all we're asking.
Yeah.
By the way, Morgan Smith wins her second Rookie of the Week honor for the WCHA this week. So that's a good, nice feather in the cap to pick up for the freshman from what it says on the BSU website is East St. Paul, Manitoba. So, that's it's just, again, young team, first year head coach. We know where this program's at. We know what they're building towards. It's just going to take some time. And you're just kind of looking for it, looking for the Denzel quote. I'm leaving with something. What are we leaving with here? We're leaving with the fact that they played really well against a ranked team in Penn State. And by the way, they're going to need to learn how to play really well against a ranked team, or at least keep that going, because number 2 Ohio State in Columbus is that's on the docket for them this weekend.
Yeah. So they have 1 series left against each WCHA team for the remainder of the season, at least until the WCHA quarterfinals. And honestly, I'm looking for anything. You've got a home series against Minnesota State. You played them close in Mankato. You could get stuff out of that series. You've got an away series against St. Thomas. We know that we can compete with St. Thomas, so you can get stuff out of that series. But aside from that, I think just like anything, you know what I mean? Like, get 1 result that surprises people. You know what I mean? Get a tie against an Ohio State or a Minnesota or something like that.
Somebody to overtime.
Lose in overtime. Get a point out of a game that isn't against Minnesota State or St. Thomas. And honestly, I'd be thrilled. I'm, again, setting the bar pretty low here. That's where we're at, though, right now. Future years, we want to raise that bar, but it's got to start here in the second half with picking up some surprise points. Let's try to reach St. Thomas. We're in a pretty close race with them for the 7th spot right now in the WCHA playoffs. Let's try to leapfrog them. Let's try to pass them up and see if we can't do that here in the second half.
Yeah, exactly. That's open. There's plenty of stuff. How about, play a really nice game with Minnesota on Hockey Day later in this month. Like, that'd be fun. That'd be a fun one. It's going to be on local TV. It's going to be on Bally. Let's do it. Let's have fun with that. So there's plenty of stuff that we can talk about as that gets, as some of these days get closer and as we kind of monitor that. But that's where the program's sitting right now. I mean, I know the bar is where it is right now, and you've painted the picture, Ian, and I agree with you. And it's also a first-year head coach, but Coach Frickland is very well respected. Obviously, she's had coaching opportunities outside of college and stuff like that. That's helped and just kind of helped give her some name recognition. And she's done some stuff. And I think it's just we gotta give it time. And like you said, just got to pick some stuff up along the way and see how that goes. So moving on, Ian, let's go from the rink. Let's go to the court. Let's talk a little men's and women's basketball. Let's start off talking about, let's just talk about the women's, because I think that there's some stuff to pick from there. Over the weekend, they had the score isn't always going to show it, but they did have a really good weekend. They played Wayne State. They went to overtime, double overtime, in fact. You lose that one, but then you pick yourself up on Saturday, and you get a nice little win, 63-50 over Augustana. Now, Augustana's winless in the conference, but you don't got to apologize for that. You didn't need to give them their first win in NSIC play. You took that. You established where you're at in the conference and at least said, hey, we can beat this team. And they took care of business with that one against Augustana. And they ended up getting the win. The Wayne State one, Wayne State's 7-5. They're 500 in the conference. So to take them to overtime and double overtime, in fact, you get outscored in that last overtime period 10-3. So, the wheels just fall off a little bit. But I think overall, this is a very solid weekend for Bemidji State to pick up on. In that loss to Wayne, Aaron Barrett had 19 points. And then in that win against Augustana, you had Taryn Plash getting 16. So there's some stuff here to kind of build off of for this team. And it's not much. The team is still 2-6 in conference play, 4-8 overall. So I'm not trying to make a mountain out of a molehill here, but that's just a really good weekend to be able to stack two games on top of each other. We talk about it with hockey as well, but with this women's basketball team, they're able to, even though you didn't win on Friday night, you still stack two nice games on top of each other. And now you just feel like you have a little bit of good momentum, some good vibes here. That's after your final weekend in 2024 conference play. You split with St. Cloud State and you marry. And now you go back on the road. You got Mankato, the defending women national champions, whatever, next week. And then you go to Winona too. So those aren't two easy options, but the vibes are just feeling much better going into this weekend than they would otherwise.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a couple of positive results to see going into the new year. And it's making Bemidji State competitive. They're 2-6 in conference. There's a log jam of teams right above you with 3 wins in conference. That's the unfortunate thing, is that Wayne State, if you win that game, there is literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams, including Bemidji State and Wayne State in this hypothetical situation, that would all be at 3 wins in conference. And it's only a 15-team conference. The top 12 make the playoffs. You're a 12 seed, you still get to play a road playoff game. And I think that would be something that for this women's program that hasn't had that in a few years would be something that is absolutely looked at as a positive and could be a reality. Like you said, they're only 4-8, so we're not trying to gas them up too much, but these wins have come at opportune times, and they have another chance to get one this weekend. A win over Winona State team who's 3-6 in conference, 7-8 overall, would help you towards the end of the season. These are going to be the games that decide whether you are in or out of that tournament. Come the end of the season, you're going to need some tiebreakers. You're going to need some of these wins to start stacking on top of each other. So if you can get those right now, that's just stuff you don't have to worry about at the end of the season, because that's kind of what it was last season. It's like, yeah, we won a few games, but we were kind of too far back at that point to make it matter anyways. And you want to see it just keep building on itself, because, yeah, after the early start to the season this team had, pick up a couple wins where they did. Now it's maybe something to build on, and we'll see what they can do in the second half. Obviously, it's going to be tough because Mankato's coming, you have to go to Mankato, right? Yeah. That's never an easy place to play, especially, like you said, the reigning national champions. So hoping for a split this weekend, a win over a Winona State team would be huge. And it's just unfortunate because they've lost 2 games in overtime now. Of course, the double overtime loss to Wayne State. If you could flip one, if not both of those results, that would go so far for where you think this program is right now. That would put them like damn near in the top 8, if they could win both of those overtime games. But it is what it is, and they just got to keep fighting.
Yeah, and we talked about this with Alex Faber, who is the sports writer for the Bemidji Pioneer, and we talked about kind of the new things that this team was trying to do on offense and trying to maybe get themselves a little more rhythm and trying to kind of improve things. And I'm taking a look here, just kind of at what this team has done so far. It's not we're not trying to make too much out of this here, but again, this team is points per game. It is up just slightly more than it was a year ago. And we think this is a team that's at least getting better as the season's gone on, or picking up a couple more wins for the women's basketball team. So I think overall, it's not written yet. Things could change, but first year in a new offense, you're already seeing slight, you're not scoring 10 more, 15 more points a game, but you're getting a little more offensive production. You're getting a little more stuff here. So I think that'll be something interesting to watch too for the women's basketball team too, as the season goes along. So with that being said, Ian, anything else kind of on women's basketball that we want to look at? I know that they have that matchup against Minnesota State on Saturday, but then they still have that matchup against Winona, and Winona's a team that's 3-6 in the NSIC. So that is a win that you can go get. So even if you maybe don't have the best showing against Mankato, can you at least, salvage your weekend and get a good outcome against Winona State? And then you split. And then nobody's expecting to go into beat Mankato. So a split, I think, just helps you kind of keep that train rolling in terms of positive vibes for this team.
Yeah, absolutely. A split in 3 straight weekends is something I don't even know when the last time we would have been able to say that about this program is. Probably back when we was covering them, when we were covering them back in the old radio booth up there in Bemidji when we were students on campus, when they had a decent program running before COVID kind of hit them hard. We'll see. I mean, yeah, you'd hope. My fear for this weekend is that you play your best game of the weekend against Mankato, and they're just too good for you anyways, and you still lose by like 8. And then you come out and you kind of play a little slower against Winona, and it sucks because it's like, man, if we would have just played our best game against Winona, we could have gotten the win. But we'll see. I mean, even if you could play a competitive game against Minnesota State, that's kind of the shitty thing, right? Playing a good game and losing doesn't really get you anywhere. There's not really a moral victory when it comes to the standings, but it would still feel pretty good to say that we, came down to the fourth quarter with the reigning national champs and the current NSIC leaders. But yeah, hoping for a split this weekend. Winona's a very gettable game. It would be a nice road win and a momentum builder. It'd be a nice building block for a program who's looking up over the last couple of weeks.
Winona State has lost 3 in a row, and obviously they'll have played on Friday night, but heck, they're a team that's scuffling a little bit, have a chance to beat them while they're down and kind of get that ball rolling. So we'll see what happens there. We'll break it all down next week. Ian, before we talk about men's basketball and kind of wrap up the show, might as well plug the Discord while we're at it.
Yeah, everybody that's listening right now should be in the Discord. I mean, it's the most phenomenal place to be if you are a Bemidji State sports fan and a fan of other sports. I mean, we've talked about Vikings football. We have I don't even know what to call him. We have a Bison fan in there, an NDSU fan who is very vocal about their opinions on NDSU football in there. So if you're a fan of FCS wrestling, we got a lot of wrestling fans in there. And we have a lot of Beaver fans in there. So if you listen to this, it probably means that you like Bemidji State athletics. So go join the Discord. It's on all of our social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, wherever. I think it's in the show description if you look at that too on our main podcast channel. So it's everywhere. Go find it. Go join it. We can share it again. It's probably been long enough, where we can definitely hit that repost button and get it out there. So yeah, it's awesome. We do live game threads for every hockey game, men's hockey game at least, and then other super important games as well. We did them for football in the playoffs this year. And guess what? That was the furthest the football team ever made it. So Is there a correlation with the Discord and the football program? I don't know. I'm not going to speculate, but I'm just going to throw it out there. It's just a fact. So,
yeah, we spend time, speaking of which, here's the Bemidji State NFL crossover. We spent time talking about Bemidji State alum Trent Baalke keeping his job as the GM of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So, your opinions on that, we can be what they can be. I certainly hope Mr. Baalke is listening and considers this his favorite Bemidji State podcast. So I wouldn't want to say anything bad about the great work he's done, making sure Trevor Lawrence is there long term and doing all that. But they did have a playoff win, which is pretty cool.
Did they?
I think it was a couple of years ago. It was a
distant memory.
Yeah, I don't know. It does feel like that in the NFL. It was some great comeback in the second half or something. Yeah. I don't know. I would just blame the other team more than I would blame credit the Jaguars. But you know what? That'll be what it'll be. Trent Baalke sticking around. So there's another football related news item to talk about for Bemidji State. His track record's a little dicey, but you know what? Hey, he's a BSU grad, so we got to have his back in that respect. So Beaver in the pros. So you got to take it where you can get him, Yeah. All right, let's wrap up the show by talking a little men's basketball. So the weekend was, it could have been better, could have been worse. Bemidji State did get a win. They played a good second half, closed out nicely to get a win over Wayne State, shot some timely free throws, got some big boards in the end, and was able to hang on, get a conference win in Wayne. That is scuffling. They're 2-6 in the conference. But again, you don't apologize for that. You take the win, you move on, you say thank you. And then you play an Augustana team that's kind of in about the same boat that you are. That's a program that's going through some transition, obviously, with new coaching staff and a bunch of other stuff. So they're in a transition year. But again, they came out and look, they played a nice game on Friday night. But Saturday's game is the one I want to talk about, Ian, because my goodness, Bemidji State held Wayne State to 27% behind the arc on Friday night. And I get it. Sometimes this is basketball. But Augustana shot 53% from three, not from the field, from three. From the field, they shot 54. So it was almost as advantageous if every shot they took on Saturday night was a three. Part of that's defense. Part of that's just good game. That's their night. You can't do anything about it. So it's hard to be mad at Bemidji State for dropping that one against Augie. Two evenly matched teams, and they just shot the lights out, and you kind of just shrug your shoulders and go, hey, that's basketball, and you move on. 53%, 54%, man. That's crazy. And again, I can't break down every single shot and go which one is just them being lucky and which one is Bemidji State giving them a high percentage look. There's ways you can break that down, but overall, man, when a team shoots 54%, there's really not much you can do but just kind of tip your hat and say, we'll get you next time, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was a crazy good shooting performance from they shot 32 threes. Almost half of their shots were from three-point range.
You might as well keep shooting them.
Yeah, and 17 of 32. And when Bemidji State shoots 21 of 59 overall, 35%, it's a recipe for disaster. And this has kind of been a disaster season so far for a team that I believe was picked 4th or 5th in the NSIC preseason polls. They currently sit 11th place in the standings, and it doesn't get any easier this weekend with a team in Minnesota State who, just won a national championship last year. They're not quite in the position they were last season. They are currently 9-7 overall, 5-3 in the conference. Winona State 11-4 overall, 6-3 in the conference. So these are going to be two tough games. And if you want any chance at kind of coming back and getting back into the fight for that, home court advantage and maybe a bye into the Pentagon, if that's where you were projected to be earlier this season. I know John Sutherland missed some time, so they're probably still figuring out the rotations, but it's got to get figured out pretty quick because you got to start stacking some wins because right now, I don't know that they're in danger of missing the NSIC tournament, but they're definitely in danger of having to go on the road again like they did last year. And, of course, last season, lost to Sioux Falls, I believe it was, in the first round of the tournament there, did not make it back to the Pentagon. So,
And that's one where if you play it in Bemidji, there's a chance that game against Sioux Falls last year. If that game's played in Bemidji, you probably win because that was a close one. And that being in Sioux Falls gave them just enough of an advantage to come away with the victory. So that's not ideal either. So, yeah, I mean, this is a tough one. Winona State, I mean, they've just historically been a basketball school. And for them to be 11-4, 6-3 in the conference is going to help them out. And yeah, Minnesota State's a little more gettable, but that's still a program you don't necessarily want to mess with. This is going to be we're going to learn a lot about this team this weekend, I think, with the 2 games that they have on tap. So we'll have to kind of watch and monitor. And like you mentioned, I think too, this team was picked 4th early in the season. And I think that was under the assumption that Sutherland was healthy and going to be there all season long. And he hasn't. And he's come back. He's in the rotation. He's, they got to figure out kind of how to play around him. And against Wayne State, had 19 points. Jaron Mayo led the team with 24 points. But then you flip to Saturday and, they want to take Sutherland out of the game. They take Sutherland out of the game. He played 18 minutes, scored 7 points. And, Tate Olson's your leading scorer that game with 18. A little bit of it, Sutherland only played 18 minutes. How much of that is in the second half? You just kind of let him lick his wounds and do all that. So, whatever. I think it'll still take some time to get everybody back. Even though Sutherland has a few games under his belt, there's still you still got to get in basketball shape, in game shape, running up and down the floor, high intensity. I know you have practice, but there's only once you get into that game setting, there's just some stuff that you kind of don't really account for until you've done it at a high game speed. So I still think this team's better basketball is ahead of them now that they're fully healthy. And to take a page out of hockey's book, I mean, that was the story last year. A little weird before Christmas, have some of your better players banged up. You get them back, you figure out how to play with them, and you end up ripping off a bunch of wins at the end of the season. That's still in play for this men's basketball team, but they've just been frustrating. And they haven't, we talked about the hockey team stacking back-to-back wins. This team won 3 games, November 9th, 13th, 19th, all in their non-conference schedule. And since then, they have posted, the last time they posted back-to-back wins was UMary on the 21st, Wayne State on January 3rd. So they have put back-to-back wins together there. But, also every time they've lost outside of the first game of the year against Central Missouri, they've lost multiple in a row. And it's that 4-game losing streak where you lost to Barry and Lynn, whatever, that's non-conference. But those 2 you dropped at the beginning of conference play, you feel like you should have came out with that win against Crookston. The one against Minot, you play well on the road against a ranked team, but you lost by 2. I mean, you lost both those games by a combined 3 points. And if those games turn around, instead of this team, you feel kind of weird about them because they sit at 6-8 and 3-5 in the conference, them being 8-6 and 5-3 in the conference, you just feel much better about them. And if you have a healthy Sutherland, you probably win both of those games. I get it, but you had them. You had chances to win. There is still talent outside of Sutherland on this team. There's guys who can do stuff. I'm trying to kind of take the good with the bad here, Ian, because I think that this is a good team. I really like this roster that the men's basketball team has. It's just frustrating when we don't always see that get translated onto the court. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, and it feels like it's been that way, outside of the one season that they actually went to the NSIC semifinals. It feels like, last few years especially, we've had a pretty good roster, and it just hasn't lived up to the hype of what we've wanted them to be. And hopefully here in 2025, they can kind of turn it around. They do have a tough schedule, man. Their next 5 games, reigning national champs, 11-4 on the season. Duluth is, top 7 in the conference right now. Concordia St. Paul is 2nd. Southwest is 3rd in the conference. So this is not an easy schedule to end your season off on. Of course, there's some easier, lighter games in the middle there between that and the end of the season, but you got to start proving that you were picked up in the top echelon of the conference for a reason. Otherwise, you're going to be in danger going on the road again in the first round of the playoffs. So we'll see what they can do. Got to take it weekend by weekend, and this weekend is a decent chance to come out and probably want to look at least for a split. If you're feeling optimistic, it is a sweepable weekend. These teams are not necessarily the elite of the elite, but we'll see how it goes. We got to take it one game at a time.
And even if they are, I think this is a talented enough Bemidji State team to make a case to sweep But yeah, it's just so tough to sweep in this conference and to do stuff like that with how good it's been this year in men's basketball. But I think there's that in them. I think they can do it. I just want to see it. I want to see this basketball team be good. I want to see the women's basketball team be good. I spent so many years, 3.5 in the gym watching those basketball teams, and there was talent there in both of those, and you just couldn't quite materialize into sustained success. And the fact over 2 years ago we had that in men's basketball. Last year, it was a little weird, but there was stretches of good basketball there. So I want to see this cross the finish line. I want to see these guys come to fruition, and hopefully they can do it. Maybe it doesn't translate into 2 wins, but at least just keep stacking some good basketball on top of each other and kind of see where this thing goes. Ian, anything else we want to talk about Bemidji State related to wrap up the podcast? Anything that comes to your mind?
No, not that I know of. I think we've covered most of what's going on over winter break. Now we're coming out of winter break. School's probably back in session, or maybe it starts next week. I'm not sure.
I think starts next week, but I guess I can't quite remember.
Yeah, it sounds like probably is what it is, but
you've been out of college so long you can't even figure out when breaks are. Doesn't that make you feel old?
Settle down now. Come on.
Makes me feel old.
Let's not start talking crazy, but
makes me feel very old. The fact that I've been done with school for half a decade. I just distract the fact by trying to tell myself that, the Vikings are going to be all right. That's what we got. Sam Darnold's brought us this far. Not going to cower after one game. Not going to be. Here's the thing, and this is the thing about Bemidji State sports. This thing about anything. The odds that your team is going to win a championship is so low that if that's all you're staking all your happiness on, if you're staking Bemidji State, your only enjoyment out of Bemidji State, let's say football or men's hockey, is that they're going to win a national championship, you're just going to hate the experience every single year to the point where you're just not going to watch. And that's not what all the enjoyment comes out of. It comes out of watching fun, competitive games week in and week out. That's what you want to see. So you know what? Vikings have a chance to do it. I don't want to be all doomerist like some of the fan bases over the week. Although your Chargers, Ian, are feeling pretty good heading into a matchup this week.
Yeah, as good as they can. Like you said earlier about a playoff game against a team from the AFC South with less wins than you on the road. What could go wrong? They definitely have a chance to win the game, but I don't think it's like set in stone. Like, oh yeah, this is such a cakewalk matchup. And I don't think that there's many of those this year in the playoffs. But yeah, you got a good point. You can't hedge this isn't the NBA. Rings aren't everything in sports, right? It's like, if you can't look back on this season and say like, hey, if you're a Vikings fan, let's say you win this weekend and you lose to the Lions or the Eagles or whatever it is next weekend, that sucks. But if you can't look back on a 14-win season where you went to the divisional and like at least get some enjoyment out of the journey, like what are you watching for? Because like you said, it's just
the 2022 Vikings were frauds. They were frauds. But dang it, if that Buffalo game wasn't fun. But
right,
what am I supposed to do? Just go, oh, this was all worth it? Like, no, like the Timberwolves went to the Western Conference Finals for the first time in 20 years. And even though they didn't win that entire journey, I was like, this is fun. This is fun.
You know what? Hell yeah.
Exactly. Like it's, Bemidji State did not win the national championship. They had a heartbreaker against Mankato. We talked about that at length about how we felt they should have won that game. And we were speechless in the car, like all the way back.
But the last 6 weeks of that season were awesome, dude. From going from 5-3 to the national quarterfinal, like you got to be kidding me. That's unprecedented stuff. So yeah, it's about the journey. You got to enjoy it while you're on it, man.
Exactly. So, we'll see. I'm just sick of. I'm sure you deal with any fans of any sport you follow. You're gonna deal with people who go, oh, what's the point? They're not good enough. They're not. If you want to make a sure bet that a team will not win the Super Bowl, because you'll probably be right. Like, if you just want to wait all year long to be miserable and then the team loses and doesn't win at all, and then you go, see, I was right. Congratulations, buddy. It's like betting the sun's going to come up tomorrow. Like, okay, man. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Congratulations. Be miserable. I don't care. So anyway, that's for another podcast. But it's always a good reminder when watching sports. We'd love Bemidji State to win a national championship. That'd be so awesome. That'd be great. men's or women's ice hockey team going to a Frozen Four and winning a natty would be absolute euphoria, to the point where I might as well just shut down the podcast at that point. Be like, what's the point? You know what I mean? Like, but
yeah, we'll never reach that again.
Exactly. Everything else will just feel numb. But even if they don't, we're still going to watch, and we're still going to be here year in and year out and do all that stuff. So it's because that's really what sports are. So anyway, that's wrapping up the Beaver Banter podcast. We'll see you guys next week. Roll